What is going on, Patriot Business Alliance? It is Monday, the 15th, and we just decided to go live with a good friend of mine, Amy Johansson. And Johansson or Johannesson?
Johannesson.
Johannesson. Don't get it wrong, because I'll probably get beat up after this is over for mispronouncing.
I still have to spell it in my head as I'm signing my signature because it's a lot of letters.
It's a lot of letters. So it's probably one of the most difficult names to have to learn in cursive.
Yeah.
Here it is there. Everybody else is finished with John Smith. They're done for the day.
Right. Yeah.
So you guys are.
It takes a little bit.
It takes a moment. Same with mine, Randigan. It's fairly long.
Yeah.
It's about 25 letters. But anyways, we're so grateful for having her here today. She is a busy mom of how many children?
5.
5 children.
Yes.
She's running for school board. She has an advisory board. She's just a very, very busy young lady, along with her husband, Trace, who's extremely busy as well. And she's like, yeah, Mike, I'll pencil you in. And finally got her in here to talk to us about some extremely important things about business. And what we want to talk about is advisory committees, advisory boards, understanding the differences between mentorship and having a structured advisory board that you can call on and utilize for your business so that you can continue to sustain growth in your business. And they make for a great sounding board and just a whole slew of different topics. So without further ado, tell us a little bit about yourself, Amy, before we get too far into it, and why you're so passionate about helping entrepreneurs get to the level that we all know we're capable of getting to.
Okay. So really, I've kind of been an entrepreneur my whole adult life. It's not something that I set out to do. And I went to college. I went to the University of Texas at Dallas. I got a degree in psychology. I thought that I would go into counseling or maybe even teaching psychology. At the time, once I dove further into it, I realized that I appreciated what I had learned about how to relate to people. And I just had this kind of natural inclination towards business. And really, I think that I learned to utilize, my psychology background and experience and kind of put that into the workplace. And it's about relationships, which I know you talk about, all the time. And it's really about relationships and connecting and going, digging deeper and getting, to the root core, issues. And so it's just something that kind of came naturally to me. My dad is a pharmacist by training. We started a pharmacy when I was in college. So I started working with him early on in the business. And, I'd go to class and then I'd come in after class and, do everything from making patient charts to filing to cleaning bathrooms to answering phones.
Tons of hats.
Yes, all the hats. A small business, a family-owned and operated business. I mean, there was like a couple of us and a couple lawn chairs and a phone, when we started. That's how it started. And so that's when I really got my feet wet, I think, in growing the business and the thrill of, building something that was your own. So when I graduated with a degree in psychology, I did the next logical thing and went into pharmaceutical sales, because that just made perfect sense. It was the business that I was familiar with, and I was able to, get hired on with a specialty division of McKesson at the time. And I did that for a couple years until I was married and had my first child, and then realized I don't want to work forever for someone else. I want the freedom and flexibility that I know, business ownership can bring me. At the time, we had sold the business that my dad had in college, and he had gone to work for them. That business changed hands a few times, and he was kind of done at climbing the corporate ladder and said, what are we going to do? Right. So we decided to open a small town retail pharmacy in Sac City, Texas, which we ran for a number of years. We had another small store in Princeton, Texas. And there we were again, rocking and rolling and running it with our family. And it parlayed into selling off the retail and closing the doors. And we got into a niche area, specialty pharmacy, long-term care patients across the state of Texas, providing for the intellectually and developmentally disabled population. And we had some chronic pulmonary care, young children who were on ventilators and needed round-the-clock care. So we provided their oral and inhaled medications. And it was something that we built together as a family. We built it from zero to eventually, $35 million in revenue. We had 55 employees. And you hear from this to this and you think, oh, wow.
So what is that?
Overnight success.
How many years was that?
16 years.
16
that was
years.
16 years of trying and failing and getting some things right and getting a lot of things wrong because we didn't know what we didn't know. And that was probably a blessing and a curse. You make a lot of mistakes. You throw things up against the wall. You hope they stick. When they don't, at least we had the fortitude to say, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something new. You have to be willing to try something different. You can't keep doing what you've been doing and expect different results.
That's the definition of insanity.
Absolutely. And we certainly had those moments, but we at least were able to pivot quickly, and we understood that, when it's not working, we got to do something different. And then I say, that was the blessing and the curse. I think that at some point we were probably too unaware of how bad it was. And I really think that that's the reason that we didn't fail, was because we didn't know what we didn't know.
We didn't know you were failing.
We didn't even know we were failing. We were just going to press on. So we did. We built that business and we sold it. And I took that opportunity to stay home with my family. Like you said, I have 5 kids. And, from that point forward, all during the time that we were building a business, I continued to have more children. And in end of 2016, when we sold the business, I took the opportunity to stay home with my family. I had 2 going into high school, or 1 in high school and 1 going into at that time. I had a 5-year-old, and then, Trace and I were trying to get pregnant. And so I knew that this was the next season of my life. And it was really important for me to do that. And I appreciated that opportunity. But I missed being involved in starting something.
The passion was still there.
The passion was still there.
Burning,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And we have a number of friends, and, Rockwall, there's a ton of opportunity for small business owners. We've been very blessed to be a part of the Chamber of Commerce and the American Legion, the RVBA, and now the Patriot Business Alliance. A number of friends who are starting businesses or working to grow their business. And, I've been tuning into your lives for the last year. And I finally looked up and said, you know what? I learned a lot of these lessons the hard way. And I feel like I have some knowledge and some information that I can share to help people grow. And that's why I started EAB.
That's awesome, Amy. It really is. And at the beginning of when you were talking, you had stated that you started this pharmacy thing and then you went into pharmaceutical sales because that's what you knew.
Yes.
Do you feel like that's what a lot of small business owners did? Take me, for example. I've been in sales for a long time. I started doing sales probably at the age of 12 and didn't even know I was a salesman, from mowing yards to just doing whatever it took to make a little bit extra scratch. But I feel sometimes people that go off and leave that corporate environment and they go into owning their own business, they stay with the same foundation that was brought. But then they find a few years down the road, that was never their passion. Right. And oftentimes I think small business owners, we can get convoluted with that, right? We're like, well, all I knew was swinging a hammer, so I opened up a construction company. But in reality, he really had a passion for muscle cars. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of times when small businesses or people become small business owners or solopreneurs, that they just think that all they're good enough to do is what they already know. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But where it really comes down to is we got to help people figure out what they're passionate about, because that's where I think people are going to become most successful.
Absolutely.
Because then I don't think that we'll be money driven, we'll be passion driven. Mm-hmm. And I believe that whenever you're working and doing something and giving back to people, it doesn't really amount to the money. Don't get me wrong, money is
but that's going to follow, because when you're taking care of your people and they're taking care of your customers, I mean, and that's what's going to drive your success anyway. So if you're doing what you're passionate about and you're pouring into, your staff, your community, doing the right thing, all of that comes back to you.
Yeah. The money's going to come if you're doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
At any given time. So we're talking a lot about passion. And I think that's what really drove Amy to creating what did you name it?
EAB, the Entrepreneurial Advisory Board.
All right.
And I figured out my passion is for solving business problems and helping people.
Solving business problems. That's huge, because that's so many different trajectories inside of a business. You're like solving business problems. I mean, you're talking from down to the minutia of hiring somebody properly, to understanding cash flow, to understanding your target audience and how to get to that target, and still maintaining a reputation and deciding that not all clients are good clients.
Yes.
Right? So
you can fire a customer.
There's a lot of problems business owners can have.
Absolutely. And really, when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter what business you're in. you face the same challenges.
You're 100% correct.
It's still about, how do we get sales? How do we make money? How do we hire people? How do we deal with personnel issues? All of the things that you mentioned, your reputation, in your particular market, it all comes down to the same kind of challenges, which is why I put together the Entrepreneurial Advisory Board. There are large corporations that can go out and hire consultants and enlist these big teams to come in and, Six Sigma, tell them how to run their operations and organizations. But when you're a small business owner, and it might just be, you and your son, or you and your neighbor, or just you, you can't afford that kind of advice. It'd be great. And sure, you could pick up a book, and there are a lot of great ones out there. But then how do you implement that? Where do you go to connect those pieces? And so I really saw a need for, in this solopreneur, entrepreneur space, from 0 to, 5 million.
Right.
There's not a whole lot of affordable resources out there. And that's where people fail in those first 5 years, trying to get to that first million, trying to get to that, 5th million. That's where people fail. That's where small businesses die.
And you're talking about $1 million. I was just trying to get to the first 100,000.
During
the first,
you got to start somewhere.
During the first 1 to 3 years, I was like, I just want to see what 100 grand looks like.
Right.
I just want to be humble.
Right.
So do you think there's a key difference between an advisory board and a mentor and a mentor, and then a group of guys that you bounce ideas off of?
Yes,
like,
I do.
What are we looking at?
I do. And that's why I started this, because there's a lot of this out there. Y'all do your lives every week, and there's Chamber of Commerce, and there's, resources. And, I know several people who get together, on Tuesdays or Wednesdays at whatever location, and we have coffee and we talk about our businesses. The difference is with an advisory board, it's actually a board. So think of it as basically your pseudo board of advisors. You can't afford to hire a board to come in and help you solve your business problems, but you can sit on this board with other business owners in similar situations, but not similar businesses, because it really doesn't matter what you're selling or what service you're offering. You're still dealing with the same challenges like we've identified. And there's some structure and there's some accountability to it. It's one thing to bounce ideas off, guys. I love how y'all do, your brainstorming sessions and whiteboards, and, you hold each other accountable and you cheer each other on. That's great. That's great to have your tribe, supporting you like that. It's another thing to have a mentor relationship, where they can say, hey, man, I was in your shoes and I know what that looks like. And here's what I did to help me be successful. Or I challenge you to do this, or I encourage you to try that, or read this book. The thing that I've put together is it's like a board of advisors. So there's a structure. It's a start time and a finish time. There's a published agenda each time. I bring in subject matter experts to advise in different areas. We've met with a CPA to talk about how to set up your corporate structure to avoid, the most tax penalty, and, keep everything legal and honest, and keep the most of your dollars. We've had someone come in and talk about the accountability chart. In your organization, what's the accountability relationship? Even if you have someone wearing a lot of hats, which a lot of times in these small businesses you do, you at least have to know who owns what. Who's accountable for solving what problem or getting that job done? Doesn't mean they have to solve it themselves, but they hold the responsibility for making sure it gets solved. So there's some checks and balances there. And then next month, or this Wednesday, 2 days from now, we've got someone coming in to talk about hiring for performance, because hiring, like y'all have talked about, is one of the biggest challenges as a small business owner. We tend to do this. If it's within my control, I can protect it, I can keep it. And you may be missing out on a lot of opportunity because there's only so much of you to go around, and you're exhausted. You carry the weight of the world as a small business owner. You're responsible for this business. You're responsible for meeting your obligations to clients. You're responsible to your family, because this is your livelihood. When you hire, you're now responsible to them and their families. And that's a lot of pressure. So you got to get it right. You know?
You're 100% correct on that. I mean, I know when I started, it was just me running 2 companies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
you've got more hustle than anybody I know.
Still being a dad, still being a husband. Sure. The bills still came in. They didn't stop. Right? The clients on one business spectrum were still calling. The clients on the other spectrum were still calling. I'm answering the same phone with two different businesses, not knowing at
Which
any given
one it
time
is.
who is calling and what are they calling about. So I had to become extremely clever on how I answered the phone.
Okay.
Right?
Until you figure out what
Hey,
they're talking
this
about.
is Mike. How can I help you? And as soon as they tell me what are they calling me about, I'm able to go
Switching gears. Yeah.
switching gears, and it is stressful.
Mhm.
It is. You do get into some uncomfortable situations
Sure.
where you're like, well, you say you do this, but you're also doing that. How can you be proficient in both? You know what I mean? And I'm really very candid and open and honest with people. It's like it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of skill, and it takes willingness to just do it.
Mhm.
So from that, we want to know about how can we understand what the true value of an advisory board is. So I'm just lowly me. My monthly income, I'm billing $25,000 a month. I'm able to put 10 grand of that in my pocket, right? Of that 10 grand, it pays my salary, and I spend of that 10, I spend another 5,000 on marketing, advertising, so on and so forth, and then now I'm left with a measly $5,000,
Mhm.
and that's to live on that's car payment, insurance, the whole 9 yards, and now I'm left with maybe, if I'm lucky, about $1,500 a month of cash flow,
Mhm.
which is sad, right?
But it's true.
But it's reality.
real. It's
the
true.
reality, folks.
Yeah.
And so
It's the American dream,
it's
Mike.
the American dream. I'm living it. I get to
Living
put
the
a
dream.
whole $5 in my pocket every single month.
There you go.
I can't even afford Starbucks coffee, so I go with Starbucks water because they're free. See that, folks? Stay hydrated.
That's awesome.
So when we're
So, yeah.
looking into this advisory board, or we're looking for what are some of the bigger advisory companies out there that you know about? Because I believe you had stated offline, you and your dad, you ran that pharmacy company. You guys went through something very similar to what you're offering now.
Yes.
What are some of those out there?
I had a peer mentorship group called Vistage. Vistage International is the company,
Okay.
and it's big. It's a CEO peer group.
Okay.
So my dad was the CEO of the company. I was the COO of the company, and we were both owners. We both held equity, so I had a shareholder stake. So he started in a CE group, and I started in what they called a key man group. It's kind of like for your second in charge.
Right.
And I started there, and I ended up, as I took over operations of the organization and moved into that, leadership role, I ended up moving into my own CE group. So we were in different groups, and it's important to have a place that's your trusted group of advisors, and confidentiality is important.
Huge.
We're running a company together, father-daughter. We butt heads plenty of times. He's very much the big picture visionary. Oh, we can do everything. We can grow it. We can sell it, making promises to people left and right. And I was the one left to pick up the pieces and put the puzzle together and figure out how we were actually going to pull that off. So it was important that we had separate places to go so that he could vent his problems and frustrations. I could get, solutions for my problems and frustrations. And so this is what was key to our success. It really taught us to think like leaders, which is a challenge. Sometimes, like you said, I'm good at swinging a hammer. I think I'll start a construction company. Well, you get so bogged down in the details, and especially if you're the only one swinging the hammer because you haven't been able to hire anyone yet for lack of time or resources or trust because you don't trust.
You just don't even know.
And you just don't know.
Because the fact remains, I was an employee.
Right.
For 15 years.
And so there's actually a really good book about that I would suggest to you and everyone watching. It's called E-Myth, and there's an updated version, E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And it talks about being the technician, the guy who swings the hammer, versus being a manager versus being a leader. Right. And there's three different roles, and you have to move to that level of thinking. And so that's something that I think that Vistage did for us. We're able to process issues, challenging issues. I've got a personnel problem. Who do I talk to about it? Your husband doesn't want to hear it. He can't solve that problem for you, or for you, I'm sure, you're very busy. Rochelle's very busy. Y'all have kids. At the end of the day, you don't want to hear each other's business problems. I mean, when you have the time to pour into that and develop and say, okay, we're a team and we're running this together, that's great. But you don't want to hear the little stuff.
Yeah, the minutia.
The minutia.
Because we have our own.
Yeah.
We have our own that we've dealt with.
Exactly.
And a lot of times we actually made an agreement that when we do have business related problems, we just wait till the kids are in bed.
Yes, you have to
You know
set
what I
an
mean?
appointment, a time to talk about it, because you can't bring it up in the middle of everything.
Because my kids don't care. She's
Right.
4. She wants to watch Peppa Pig or something
Right.
ridiculous, or
Right.
I'm getting something unclogged out of the toilet.
Right. You're in dad mode.
I'm in dad mode. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you have teenagers, and they strive for our attention. And I believe like that is probably my most important job as a leader is to my children.
Absolutely it is.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so
you're modeling this to them.
yeah. And so they look up to us as leaders, as parents, as doing the right thing, and so on and so forth.
And I could say growing up, in a world where my dad, was willing to branch out and start his own company, and then raising my kids in an entrepreneurial family. And then my siblings are all much younger than me, but they've been raised, watching, I'm 18 years older than my closest siblings. So they're the same age as my kids. In some case. Yeah. My kids and my siblings went to high school together, which is interesting. But I very much think that them growing up in a world where they heard those conversations, not in a way that took away from the obligation to the family, because that comes first, but at least it expanded their horizons and kind of poured in the potential that you can do something like this.
Yeah.
And it's hard, and here's what it's going to require. And they all very much, I think, have had that strong foundation and aspire to go out and do great things because we've exposed them to that. And I know that your kids are exposed to the kind of conversations as well, where we talk about real problems and, running a business and the responsibility that we have. And I think it's a good way to talk to your kids about money and managing relationships. And
it's so funny. Haley, my oldest daughter is Haley. She'll turn 17 this month, probably like the next 10 days, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yes. March 25th.
Yeah. 10 days.
She'll come up and she'll be like, Dad, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know if I want to run your drug testing company, your roofing company, your mom's apartment locating company. Me and Michelle look at each other. She goes, we're like, you're not running none of that. Like,
Girl, you're going to find your own way.
You're going to find your own niche. You're going to do it. And we'd love to bring her on board, but we have to.
But you raise your children to lead. I'm going to give you the best foundation and the tools and resources to be successful and send you on your way. I'm going to equip you. And then you have to go and figure it out for yourself. You don't just graduate and walk into any of this.
So let's go back. So we have Vistage.
So Vistage.
Six Sigma?
So Six Sigma is a much larger.
So that's another sort of.
So it's not an advisory board. But Six Sigma is a much larger, how do I explain it? Because I don't want to say it wrong. So people that I know who are Six Sigma certified are taught to, it's like a curriculum type thing. So they are taught to find problems. They are taught to pull back the layers and, identify all of the areas that are potentials for error so that they can improve your error rate.
So they're like a counselor for your business.
Not exactly. So Six Sigma, I had a friend who worked for Raytheon.
Gotcha.
She's an employee of Raytheon, but they paid for her to get Six Sigma certified.
Gotcha.
So she went through the coursework required to be an expert in how to find errors and problems and how to improve processes to reduce those errors and problems.
Gotcha.
So that's what it is.
Okay.
But yeah, it's huge and it's expensive.
Yeah.
We certainly couldn't afford to do that in our business. I mean, we talked about, because an error rate in a pharmacy, kind of a problem. You can't make mistakes. There's liability. And that's another thing is when it comes down to accountability. So we were taught to think like leaders. One of the big things was how do we reduce our error rate? Because if you make a mistake, you send the wrong medication to the wrong patient. Hopefully they don't accidentally take it, because that's a whole other problem. But even the fact that I opened my package and this isn't mine, well, now where's mine? And I needed it today. I don't have time to wait for you to find it and get it to me in 2 business days. So we have to get it right. And, it was funny because I had a couple team members sometimes were like, oh, that's just unrealistic. You just can't expect it. It's going to go right all the time. I'm like, I don't think this is the right place for you.
Yeah, right.
Obviously you don't understand the importance of what we're doing here. And so, what I did is I took them to see Cirque du Soleil. Have you ever been there?
A couple times.
To see? Okay.
Love them. They're
amazing.
Great outfit.
Amazing. So I took them to Cirque du Soleil as kind of a team building activity. And I said, look at everything they're doing. It has to be timed. It has to be practiced. It has to be perfected. It has to be flawless. There is no room for error. They don't have safety nets.
Right.
If they can do that, we can do this.
Sure.
We can get it right. And I really think that was absolutely.
And I'm sure it was eye-opening.
It
gave them a new
and it's the
perception.
motivation and a new perspective. Sometimes you just have to look at things through a different lens before you understand, oh yeah, we can do that. We are capable of that. So that's something that, going back to what's the value of, a group like this is it taught me to think like a leader. It gave me a place to go to process, important problems and issues, to vent my frustrations. I learned from what the others brought to the table. And that's something in the EAB group that we have. There are several different business owners from different walks of life, different experiences, different upbringings, working in different businesses, and they all bring a different perspective to the collective. And it's important to have that. And then, we bring in subject matter experts to deposit, information into the group as a whole. And so it's very structured. And I certainly found my experience in a group like this very valuable. And I wanted to bring something like that to the small business owner, the entrepreneur, the solopreneurs, the ones who couldn't afford, to go into something bigger, because you got to get to that level first
You have to,
before you can,
before you can crawl, you got to crawl before you can walk, and
exactly.
all the same cliches ring extremely true. I'm just let you guys know I am a part of the EAB that Amy has, and I think I'm going on.
You were a hard sell.
I'm definitely. I am.
This guy doesn't like to spend any money.
No, but that's how the rich stay rich.
Well, exactly.
Right?
I agree with you completely.
I mean, there's a reason behind it, but then there was also become value based.
It's value,
right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to show up somewhere and already know. I don't want to show up and be the smartest person in the room.
Absolutely. I tell my husband that all the time. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
You're in the wrong room.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're paying somebody, an advisory board, a mentor, or a whomever, but you already have all of this experience,
then what's the point?
Then which way do I go then? When do you outgrow an advisory board? When do you say, what, is there a graduation? Is there where do you find that line where you say, I'm tapped out? Yeah, I think you've taken me to the water and I'm drinking it. So is there a part in time where somebody comes up and says, thanks, I'm at my point? Or is that up to the EAB to continuously make those changes based on the successes of your client?
Yes. So that's what I would say. I don't think you ever outgrow an advisory board. It's structure, it's accountability, it's, adding to your toolbox the things that you can use to make successful in your business. And as your business grows and develops, you're going to reach a level where you have different problems.
Right.
Some of the stuff is always the same, and then some of the stuff gets much bigger, and it has a much larger impact. And so I think it's important for the group to grow together. And the camaraderie of the group is important, and that level of trust is important so that you could really dive deeply into those confidential matters and, matters of money. Or people take that real seriously. That's personal. You have a hard time talking about money with people,
Because on the front, you're telling everybody, oh, I'm extremely successul.
And then
I'm
you're
driving the new Corvette.
Yeah.
But then behind closed door, you're like, man, I can't even balance a damn check, bro.
Right. I hope we make payroll this week, or
Yes.
people think you're extremely successful because of something. And you're like, you have no idea what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
So it takes. And then there's the opposite side where you don't want people to know how extremely successful you actually are.
Right, because what happens?
Because you may not be able to trust their motives.
Well, and then you start people figure it out and they get handouts.
Right.
Oh, well, hey, man, you got all this money. You can't just spare me, you know what I mean? You can't just help. And I think that's where we want to hone in on the importance of an advisory board, that we can come in, we can have a clean slate. It's completely anonymous. There's so much confidentiality that goes into it. I believe in the analogy, loose lips sink ships, right? You're like, because if something got out of that room that was disclosed in confidentiality, it could ruin a business.
Okay.
It could definitely ruin a company, or it can ruin trust. And so it's important that whatever group or board that a business owner decides to go with, they need to know that there can be some adverse consequences if they're in a group that they don't feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
And
I think that there's a difference in the group you have coffee with at the corner cafe versus the scheduled, on neutral ground, neutral territory, accountability group that's going to hold your feet to the fire. And we do that. We process issues and say, okay, what are you taking out of this with you? What are you going to do? And then the next time we see each other, did you do the thing you said you were going to do? That's important.
That's extremely, and I, for one, need to be held accountable because I get so distracted.
Sure, in the minutia.
So overwhelmed with trying to keep the staff online, trying to keep this online, and then a whole new client shows up. Hey, I need this taken
Shiny
care of.
object.
So everything over
all
here.
All of a sudden, you throw everything at that.
Yeah, and then
but it's important to get out of the business to work on the business. If you're
Say that
stuck,
one more time.
it's important to get out of the business to work on the business. If you're stuck in the daily minutia, doing the daily stuff, being the technician, as opposed to the manager or the leader, you can't look down the road. You can't make plans. You're too busy. You can't see the forest for the trees. It's important to get out of the business to work on the business. And going back to, how much is it worth to you? What are you willing to invest? It depends on where you want your business to go. I say all the time, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together.
Yeah, and that's a perfect point, because I know back in the day when I was running everything solo and I was able to, just continuously make good income, I realized I wasn't happy, right? Because I was so mentally exhausted by the time I got home that it wasn't fun anymore. The passion was slowly starting to dwindle out, right? But then when I decided to take a pay cut, right, I was like, you know what? I'll just take a pay cut and I'll hire somebody for half of what I'm making. And then it just opened up and actually made more money because I was able to free up time that I got caught up into the weeds of invoicing or chasing down people that owed me money, or talking to new clients and closing them and sending them all these different things to make a deal go through.
Going like this
because I'm selfish.
You didn't trust anyone else is going to do it quite your way or as good as you would.
So a lot of it was fear, not knowing the right steps to take, and not fully understanding. I didn't have anybody to talk to. I just didn't. I mean, this was 2011. I had never heard of an advisory board. I've never heard of Vistage. I've heard of Vonage, but not Vistage.
This is different.
I never knew any of this stuff was out there. Never heard of any of this stuff until I just one day tripped and kind of fell into it. Right. And that's where all of this came from over the last few years of my life, and meeting with so many people in this city that has gave me a tremendous amount of clarity on what to do in business and how to continue to scale it and grow it. And trust me, folks, I still have my days that I don't get everything completed. I still miss things. I still forget about things. I still get overly busy. But what I have done is created new habits. And what I have done is implemented the things that have been taught in the advisory board, and implemented the things that we talk about with our trusted groups of friends. And so I don't know how long we've been on, but I want to dive into, because Amy, like I said before, she's an extremely busy young lady. She got a lot of things burning. So I don't want to take up way too much of your time, Amy. What about exit strategy for business owners? What does that look like? You said you guys 16 years and finally you're just like, you know what, I'm out. What was that defining moment that says, you know what, I'm gone?
Because it was pharmacy, we were at the mercy of the state and federal government as far as reimbursement for prescriptions go. Every time there was a change in legislation, and certainly a change in presidential office, every time that there were large changes like that impacted the state of Texas and the federal payment system, Medicaid and Medicare, that impacted us. And so we found ourselves being affected by that so much that we were doing the same business, filling the same number of prescriptions, taking care of the same number of clients, but making, $100,000 less each month, because it's just the stroke of a pen and pass of new legislation. Wow. And suddenly you have to figure out how to do more with less. And sometimes that can be good because it certainly forces you to improve your processes. Like I mentioned, error rate. We can't afford to get this wrong. Not only are there, lives hanging in the balance because we're talking about medication, but, then there's, from the back end, it's the cost of errors, reworking the prescription, the time and labor that goes into that, shipping to bring it back, to send it back out again. I mean, all of those things that go in on the back end. So, it force us to be lean. You get real lean when you have limited resources. How do we do the most with as little as we have? How do we get, hire the right people, putting the right people in the right seats? We implemented a process called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which my dad is currently a certified implementer of EOS, and I'm in training to become a certified implementer. And that's something that changed our business. At the end of 2011, we had done $32 million in sales. We had 55 employees. We were $7 million in debt. We were 50 days behind with our primary wholesaler. And when we filed our taxes, we had lost $2 million. Wow. And like I said, I think we were too stupid to know how bad it was. We just kept going and going, I mean, we got by, with a lot of prayer and some dumb luck probably. But it was bleak in 2011. And so we that's when we started implementing the entrepreneurial operating system. We obviously couldn't afford to hire a consultant or anyone to come in and clean it up for us. We had to figure it out. And we, stumbled onto this and it really forced us to identify who we were as a company, why we did what we did. And it became clear through these actions of metric and accountability, you only manage what you measure. So we established a scorecard and everyone in the company knew what they were responsible for on that scorecard. They all knew our purpose. They all knew our mission. They all knew our vision and they knew their number. And if you don't know your number, then what are you accountable for? Who are you accountable to? If you don't know that what you're doing matters and that you can make a contribution to this number that goes into that number that affects this bottom line, that equates the success of our company.
Sounds like a whole segment in itself. Amy.
Right, that's a whole other thing.
I may have to have you back on just to talk about
that's a whole other thing. So it's something
EOS,
that we did. We had a scorecard and we started having a regular meeting rhythm. Is something that I preach to y'all all the time. Have a regular meeting rhythm. Everyone needs to know what they're responsible for. They need to know who's going to ask them about it. You have the same meeting, the same day, the same time every week, and you hold people accountable for it. And everyone wants that. It's just like your kids need structure. They need boundaries. They need guidelines. They need to know where it's safe to play, and what's over the line. And as soon as you make that really clear to them, they thrive in that situation. And that's what we found within our company. When we defined that and we, involved our leaders in defining that, they thrived in that situation. And the ones that didn't, they weeded themselves out easily. It just became very clear who was the right fit and who wasn't. And we hired and fired based on our core values.
Wow.
Because skills can be taught, but values cannot. Right. And so I think it's very, very important. That was an important piece of it. So we were able to recoup, our losses in 2 years. We had turned the business around and we broke even. We weren't that much. We paid off $7 million in debt. We didn't write down $2 million in losses. We broke even. We scaled back a little bit as was necessary because of, federal regulations and, the changes that were being made to Medicare and Medicaid and our reimbursement structure. And then we positioned ourselves for sale. So we were successful, we were thriving, we were leaner, we positioned ourselves for sale, and we sold to our largest competitor in the state of Texas because it was worth the most to him.
Yes.
So
and that
you'll pay a premium if you're his competition.
Yeah.
And that's what we did.
And so that's where it's at, folks. When we talk about exit strategies, know the value of your company.
Absolutely.
Know the worth of who you are.
And who it's worth more to.
Yes. And figure out what your competition is doing in order for them to say, hey, look at that guy. He's hot on our heels.
Yep.
They have two options, right? Merge or acquire them. Right.
That's exactly right.
And so,
and for us, we were at the point where we were either going to be the gobbler or the gobbly,
right.
and we chose to sell and cash in our chips and get out.
Did you think that the passion kind of started dwindling with pharmacy? Nobody was really happy to show up to work and sling pills, right?
We were happy.
For lack of a better term.
Yeah, I was happy because that whole turnaround was my baby as chief operating officer and implementing, this structure and accountability and holding people accountable and having these regular meetings was where I was really thriving. Right. But again, that goes back to where does your passion lie? My passion lies with solving problems, growing teams, building businesses. And it wasn't necessarily what the business was, anymore. And we were at the mercy of the state and the federal government. So it was just time. It was time to get out of that world for us.
Seemed like a really sticky situation. It was probably right place, right time, right money.
Sure.
Let's go ahead and move on down the road. I really look forward to talking to you in a little more detail about that EOS.
Sure.
I think that's extremely of value, and I believe our audience would love to hear about that as well. But you said something that caught me, and I was like, whoa, that's what I'm not doing. And that I keep saying, hey, I need to get team meetings lined up, right? And I just haven't done it yet. And so I think I'm going to hold myself accountable and really start to have these meetings, because I, as a business owner, come up with thousands of excuses.
Sure.
Oh, I got something more important. But then really, it's nothing more important than giving the attention to your staff. Because just like your children, once you quit paying attention to them, they're not going to show you the love anymore.
Sure.
Right. And you want a culture that loves to come into work, that loves to come in and have the same ideology, the same core values, the same end result that we're all looking for.
And we can all be rowing in different directions and not even realize it.
Exactly.
You think you're going to the same location, but everyone kind of has a different path and a different way to get there. But when you have that regular conversation, and it's not just about, the metrics and accountability, but it's the opportunity to meet each time, build that trust, that spirit of camaraderie. We're all rowing in the same direction at the same time, working together. We're going to get there faster. We're going to be more successful. And when there's a problem, I know this is my time with Mike that I can bring it up to him.
Right.
Rather than being somewhere out on a job site or whatever, and this little thing happened, and should I call him? And maybe I'll tell him when I see him tomorrow, or
Right.
Everyone has a regular time and place that they know to bring this stuff to the table.
Yeah, because it oftentimes Mike may not be ready for that text message, or he may not be ready for that problem.
There is no productivity in the constant, drive-bys and rapid fires and hey, catching someone when they're on their way to do something else. That doesn't get us anywhere.
Yeah, I guarantee you that is one of my biggest struggles and hurdles that I'm working on this year, to just get just a little bit more in tune with the people that want to be a part of this team.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can take a couple of key things out of this conversation today is, if you're by yourself, get plugged into an advisory board. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily have to be with Amy's EAB. If you want to, we'll definitely give you Amy's contact information and let you guys talk on the side. But we also know that a lot of viewers are around the state of Texas. So our people listening in may not be here.
Find something local to you.
But if you want to find somebody that's local, that will hold you accountable, that will set up strategies and structure for your company, it is crucial to invest that money into your business, because it will pay you tenfold. So take the challenge, look into your business, see where you're at, and promise yourself that you want to be held accountable for it. Amy, got any saved rounds for us? Anything that you have any things that we didn't tap in that you think we missed or want to just share to our audience real quick?
Something that we talked about offline right before we started was carrying the weight of the world. And I really believe that, small business owners, it can be overwhelming if you try to do it alone. You're carrying, like we said, the responsibility for your family, for the family of your employees. You're paying all the bills. You're trying to get all the work done yourself in a lot of cases. And it's really, really difficult to learn how to move out of that mindset, or where you can be stuck, where you're just trying to keep your head above water, to a place where you have, freedom and flexibility and room to breathe and to grow and to learn from other, business owners like that. And if I can say anything, is don't put it off. So many times I hear people say, oh yeah, I'm going to come next month. I'm too busy this month. And I'm like, that's why you need to be there, is because you haven't figured out how to get out of the business. And if you can't get away for 4 hours that we meet to learn, some valuable tools and strategies for growing your business, then you're really in a rough spot.
Yeah.
So I just think it's just important, when you're carrying the weight of the world, you don't have to do that alone. You don't have to try to handle that. And that's the importance of building a good, solid team. And we do that from a peer perspective, and you can do that in your business once you learn how.
Well, that's huge. Again, thank you so much, Amy, for jumping in here, sharing some of your knowledge, your experience with us. Mm-hmm. Thank you guys out there for listening in. We appreciate it. And again, if you guys need to get in contact with Amy, hit me up, let me know, and I'll be happy to share a contact with you.
Thanks.